Some weapons in Naruto are so dangerous that even powerful ninja can lose a fight without being hit once. And the craziest part is, most of these weapons don't rely on raw destruction. They rely on rules. If you don't understand how they work, you can lose instantly. Hey there, welcome to my channel Shinobi Empire, where you learn Naruto better. In this video, we're breaking down the 5 legendary weapons of the Sage of Six Paths, what they actually do, why they were feared, how powerful they really are, and the hidden details many fans miss. Bashosen. Among all the Sage's treasured tools, the Bashosen is usually the first one people notice, because visually, it looks powerful even before it is used. It is a giant fan, large enough to immediately stand out in battle, but its true value is not size. It is what happens when chakra is poured into it. The Bashosen has the rare ability to release all 5 basic chakra natures. Fire, wind, lightning, water, and earth can all come from this single weapon depending on how the user channels chakra into it. In the Shinobi world, this is extraordinary because mastering even 2 chakra natures already takes years of training for most ninja. Most Shinobi spend their lives specializing in only 1 or 2 elements, while complete mastery of all 5 is something only the highest level Shinobi ever achieve naturally. What the Bashosen does is ignore that limitation completely. A person holding this fan suddenly gains access to elemental attacks they may never have trained for themselves. One swing can release a fire blast, another can send out slicing wind, another can strike with lightning. It turns raw chakra into elemental force almost instantly, but that power comes with a serious price, and this is why the weapon remained legendary instead of common. The chakra cost is enormous. Every use drains the wielder heavily, and the stronger the attack, the heavier that drain becomes. This is not a weapon ordinary shinobi can casually use in long combat. In fact, the series makes it clear that most people would exhaust themselves very quickly, trying to force repeated attacks from it. That is why the Bashosen became especially associated with Kinkaku and Ginkaku. Their bodies were abnormal by shinobi standards, because after surviving inside Kurama and consuming its flesh, they carried unusually powerful chakra reserves. That allowed them to use weapons like this more effectively than most people ever could. And even then, what we saw in war likely was not the full ceiling of the weapon's power, because no ordinary shinobi has ever shown enough stamina to continuously push it without consequence. So, the Bashosen's true strength is freedom. It allows one person to attack like multiple elemental specialists at once, but only if their chakra can survive the cost. Kokinjo. If the Bashosen looks dangerous immediately, the Kokinjo does the opposite. It appears simple, almost harmless at first glance, just a golden rope. But in reality, this rope begins one of the most unusual sealing systems ever introduced in Naruto. The moment the rope touches a target, it starts extracting something called the word soul. This is not physical chakra, and it is not ordinary spirit energy. What the weapon pulls out is essentially the target's most frequently spoken word, the word that person naturally uses more than any other in speech. And that is what makes the weapon so unusual. It turns language itself into part of combat. In normal battle, shinobi worry about speed, jutsu, and attack rate. The Kokinjo changes that completely because after contact is made, the enemy has already entered a hidden trap, whether they realize it or not. What makes this dangerous is that physical toughness means almost nothing here. A powerful body does not block the rope's effect. Durability does not cancel it. If contact happens, the extraction begins. That means even someone capable of surviving huge ninjutsu can immediately become vulnerable through one touch. But the rope by itself does not finish anything. It only opens the first door. And that is because this weapon was never meant to stand alone. It was built to work together with another treasure. Shichiseiken. The Shichiseiken, the 7-star sword, enters right after the rope, and this is where many fans misunderstand its role. Because although it looks like a sword, cutting is not what makes it important. Its true role is identification. Once the Kokinjo pulls out the word soul, the Shichiseiken records exactly which word has been extracted. In other words, it identifies the word that person says most often. This makes the sword less like a traditional weapon and more like a spiritual reading instrument. It is reading personal speech patterns, tied to the target's inner identity. That is why this sword feels so strange, compared to ordinary, legendary blades in Naruto. It is not about damage, it is about information. And in battle, information becomes deadly because the next weapon depends completely on knowing that word. Without the sword, the sealing process cannot be completed properly. So, even though people often remember the more dramatic sealing tools, the Shichiseiken is actually the quiet center of the whole system. It gives the exact key needed for the trap to work. Beni Hisago. Once that word has been identified, the Beni Hisago becomes terrifying. This crimson gourd looks simple, but it carries one of the most unforgiving sealing conditions in the series. If the target says the word identified by the sword, they are immediately pulled into the gourd and sealed. And what makes this frightening is how naturally people fall into it. Because in battle, speaking is instinctive. People react when attacked. They shout names, they answer, they complain, they curse. And all it takes is one natural moment of speech. The instant that exact word leaves the target's mouth, the sealing activates. No explosion, no dramatic struggle, no second attempt, just immediate sealing. That is why the Beni Hisago is psychologically dangerous. Once enemies understand how it works, they start fighting against their own natural habits. They hesitate before speaking. They become distracted by language itself. So this weapon attacks the mind before it attacks the body. Kohaku no Johei. The Kohaku no Johei takes that same philosophy and makes it even simpler. This amber purification jar seals anyone who responds after hearing their name called by the wielder. That sounds almost too simple until you realize how powerful instinct is in battle. Most people answer automatically when called. Even experienced shinobi react before thinking when they hear their own name in the middle of combat. And that is exactly why this weapon is dangerous. Unlike the rope, sword, and gourd combination, the Kohaku no Johei does not need several stages. It only needs one moment of natural reaction, one answer, one instinctive response, and the target is sealed. That simplicity makes it one of the most efficient treasures among all the sage's tools. Because while other weapons require setup, this one waits for ordinary human behavior to do the work. What makes all these treasures fascinating together is that none of them behave like ordinary ninja weapons. The Boshosen overwhelms through elemental power. The rope, sword, and gourd create a layered spiritual trap using speech itself. The amber jar weaponizes instinct, and all of them reveal something important about the era they came from. These were weapons built when power was tied not only to destruction, but to hidden conditions and understanding. That is why, even centuries later, they were still treated as dangerous enough to preserve carefully rather than use casually. Because once these treasures appear in battle, strength alone stops being enough. The person who understands the rule usually survives. And that is why the Sage of Six Paths weapons remain some of the strangest and smartest weapons in Naruto. They were built to punish mistakes, not just overpower enemies. And honestly, that makes them more dangerous than many weapons that simply destroy everything in front of them. If you enjoyed this breakdown, leave a like, subscribe for more, and check out the other Naruto explanations on this channel. Because there are still a lot of hidden details in the Shinobi world that most fans never notice. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay curious and stay connected.